Welcome to the Dialogue Architects, where we explore how enterprises can thoughtfully design, scale, and govern conversations between humans and machines. Today, we're joined by Joachim Belz, who's joining us from Bonn, Germany, and brings with him varied experience on loads of big German brands such as E.ON and Carglass. One of the things I'm excited to talk about with Joachim today is your experience that spans from working as a UX consultant, really on the fine-tuning of the design of conversational interfaces, all the way to today, where you're serving as a conversational AI engineer, really thinking about the overarching architecture of the dialogue itself. Joachim, really excited to chat with you today, and welcome to our podcast. Thanks so much for joining today. It's absolutely a pleasure to have you on. I know, thinking back, I think the first time we met, actually, when you very generously agreed to give us a full feedback rundown of your experience with Rasa, for which we were most thankful for. You became a bit of a legend internally as you, I think, provided something like a 24-page document of feedback, maybe around about there, which is excellent. But I'd love to maybe start a little bit with your foundations, because I think you're really interesting kind of looking, you have a really interesting job role and kind of lots of experiences from different places. Can you give us a quick kind of overview of what brought you into the kind of conversational design and dialogue architect space, really?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a jack of all trades with all the downsides and upsides this brings. So originally I was a developer and then a technical consultant, technical project manager, and around 2008, I started to work for Deutsche Telekom at the website management, and then I had more, let's say, exposition to customers. And I was always the front and the let's think about the customers guy. And then this got so strong in my role at Deutsche Telekom that I thought, well, that's my new place. I don't want to swallow another technical framework of the year again. I want to do something else. I want to be there for the customers. And then I went into usability and UX design and made some certifications, and then worked as a usability consultant, and later on also as a UX designer for some years from 2013 on. Sorry. So all in all, I think I had most of the roles somebody can have in a software design project, from the front end to the development to configuration management. So whatever you can think about.
Amazing. And I think one of the things that makes you so valuable in a project is kind of your ability to look at the business problems and the technology problems in the same place. And I think importantly, though, there are different jobs to be done in this role. And I'd love to hear from you kind of what you're seeing as you've kind of moved from different projects and are looking at your future project at DHL. What are kind of some of the things that you see changing in the landscape and things that you think are important for the next generation of people doing UX in dialogue?
It has been, at least for a while, been very fashionable to talk about T-shaped people, right? People, that just means you are able to look into other people's worlds, you understand the business side, you understand the developers, what their needs are, what their perspective on the world is. And I think that's very important for a designer or a UX manager, whether they are doing a user interface or, a graphical user interface or a voice or a chat interface. It's always important to see all the sides and to be able to communicate with all of them, because you need your developers to get the best out of what you have with your technical base, right? You need to understand the business side. It's great to satisfy customers, but if this is going against the business, then you have a problem there, right? So I think that's a traditional problem, this having all these perspectives and doing a design that at best satisfies all of them, works well with the technology that is at hand at the moment. I think this is very much true for where we are today with voice and chat design, especially with the large language models. And today large language models, with having even something like agentic behaviors. It's more like you have a real dialogue there, a real co-production of what is happening. And with this situation, I think you need to work much more closely with your developer colleagues and maybe your data scientists or AI engineer colleagues to make sure that the models are really up to the task and are doing what you actually want them to.
I totally agree, because I think in the past we had only really one way to manage dialogue, and that's something that's absolutely changed. And I think that's such a opportunity for conversational AI or agentic AI teams to take on today, is that there are so many different tools to, drive a user journey. But I think every company is kind of on this axis of bravery, moving towards the future innovation, and along the way, there's so many different ways to manage this dialogue, which is really exciting. What do you think about that, and how has that been your understanding of the dialogue system? How does that turn up in your day-to-day work?
Yeah. So access of bravery is great. I usually talk about risk management, which is much more boring, but maybe more compatible with managers, right? Because bravery sounds maybe not compatible to managers, but great for the team. And I think that's the thing you always have to think about the risk or the bravery you want to take, about the benefits you might have when using large language models, when using agentic autonomous behavior to a degree. I think there is too much hype in the whole industry at the moment. I really congratulate Rasa. I really find your perspective very refreshing. That you are, you're not hiding the risk, right? There are other companies that are just talking about how great this future is. We have now an AI colleague that's our best friend, and we just have to tell them what to do, and they just do it. And I think that is far from the truth, at least today. Yeah. These are probabilistic models which have really astounding, really great language capabilities, right? But if they have to decide stuff, if they have to, they have to act, or they have to, they have to be properly aligned with what you and the customer want to achieve with this voice bot, then there is a lot of work to do. They have, as I always say, they have great capabilities, but you really have to work for the reliability, right? So you can have a demo after 2 hours that's mind-blowing, but it might take 2 to 4 months to make this really reliable and usable. And you always have to think about which parts really benefit from being non-deterministic, being flexible, stating it in a positive way, right? And other parts that might be better when they are mostly deterministic. Maybe the large language model is allowed to find a personalized phrasing, but it's clear what is to do now in the process. And let's face it, most of the time business processes are very strict, right? I think I talked about alignment. I think hallucination is one problem, but it's only part of this greater problem of having a proper alignment. You even have this with your employees, right? You have to communicate. You have to work together to find a proper alignment. What really does my team, my company want? I have my ideas. You might brief me for 5 minutes, and then I think, now I know what she wants. I know what I have to do for the company. And then 2 days later, when we look at my work, then we find out something you meant in another way, something we should have talked about, right? Something is in the company policy might be different from what I expected it to be. And that's the same problem with those LLMs. We give them just a few words. There's this great article by some O'Reilly author, freely available in the web. he talks about the magic words. We give them just a few words. Those can be technical terms, and the AI in the background, because of its training, has a world of associations there, if you wanted to. But are they all the right associations? Is it aligned with what you understand, what your understanding of these words or of the scenario are? And this is something you really have to test, to evaluate. That's why I'm talking about data scientists, about model evaluations you have to do, about simulations and testing and constant monitoring, because things can really go wrong. Those are not humans which are properly socially aligned. And what does it mean, right? We have, at the moment in the world, there are many things that seem to be, at least between some countries, some cultural backgrounds, seem to be a constant between all of us, but those things are shifting at the moment, right? And also what different things mean and how they are interpreted by something like those large language models can be very different. And of course, you have those outliers. Customers are talking in a way that you didn't expect, and most of the time the LLM will help you out, right? It's not pattern matching anymore. You don't have to collect 150 samples of ways of asking for the time or something. But now the large language model will mostly handle this for you. But sometimes they will react in totally unexpected ways, and you have to cater for that. And if this risk isn't beneficial, then don't take it, right? Only take it where flexibility and this ability to work with language variants to sort of understand semantics in a certain restricted way, only when then this is really beneficial.
Now, I'd love to dive into kind of the job to be done on this front, because I think you've talked a lot. I loved your discussion about, kind of the T-shape. You as a role with developing jobs to be done sit in between the business and the technical. You're kind of the link between. What do you think is the best workflow or process to try and, link the business folks to the technical piece? Specifically, I would love to hear more about how you organize deciding what types of technology to do and when. I think from Rasa perspective, or at least from my perspective, I see there are, as you described, very deterministic ways to go through a process. Works very specific. At Rasa, we call this process calling, the ability to kind of call these processes at the right time and always follow them. On the other side of the axis, how do you decide which technology meets the business problem?
So you really have to go to your customer, go to your business side, and really understand what the problem is, right? Don't start solving the problem. Don't start developing solutions before you really understand what is my scenario, what is the context, what are the business goals and the user needs, to really then start out thinking about the conversation. And then I wouldn't start out thinking of the conversation in a technological way, but really think about, if I had an agent that could talk naturally, and I might even have one, right? I could, for example, listen to people in the contact center or look at transcripts of chats, right? So I even have examples of how humans do it. And then I can start thinking about what kind of challenges do I face here? What are the things we have to make sure? What are the business processes behind that? Of course, that's a completely different thing. These are the core sets we have to put our journey into, right? So there are specific requirements. It's so this is this human factor. And then I would think about what are my technical abilities, and I should discuss this with other people, right? With developers, with AI engineers. Think about how can we classify, or how can we determine what the user's call intent is, and or call intents, maybe even, if we want to make it complicated. And then we might find, well, at the moment, LLM classifiers would be great for that, but maybe they are a bit slow.
Thinking about if I had the chance, like you, to be out in the field and architect things, actively, that's something like I think would work for me really well, because you have the agents contained in their kind of world, but it can also coexist with structured use workflows. And I think that's when I look at the market, I see there's a lot of one or the other. And I think finding ways to merge these two approaches together, it could be really powerful for a lot of teams.
Yeah. But there is another company I won't mention here, but they started out with, we are going all in agents.
Yeah.
We have this new way of doing things where you only have prompts. They now have to introduce deterministic parts because they found this wouldn't work. So I think at the moment, with the inherent creativity, let's call it like that, of large language models, this hybrid approach is I think the best of both worlds we can do at the moment. And then you can flexibly select where the axis of bravery. Is it beneficial to now be brave, and what is the worst thing that can happen, and can I guard my conversation against that, because I have guardrails, I have other means to mitigate risk? Then let's do it. And otherwise, I should stay with deterministic and with this great way that you have found with Calm to somewhat abstract, to have a language understanding layer, but then have a business logic layer that is deterministic and reliable. And
Absolutely. And I think on the guardrails front, one of the things I see is a lot of focus on guardrails and then not a lot of focus on basic design, kind of first principles. So, if obviously for appointment booking, probably the worst that can happen is, you send the wrong appointments to the back end. But good practice, I would say generally, is to confirm with the user that you have collected the right dates.
Right.
Because even if you're over the phone, it could be the case that you get it wrong, or you type it wrong. So I think in general, there's a lot of ways to guard against error by simply double checking with people, the same as you would normally, really, or in a normal conversation.
So I think that's a very important point you're making there, that all that we've learned, that we thought about how conversations work between humans, they still apply, right? So something like doing a conversation round. So we seemingly have decided on a date, but this could be something like, let's do your last suggestion. I said I couldn't, but I can make it possible. Well, is it the thing the LLM thinks it is, or the human agent thinks it is, or did the customer have something else in mind? Did their memories might not be, or their interpretation of the situation might not be the same? So you need this conversation loop, right? This confirmation loop, right? And there are so many other things about. That's actually, I think we talked about that. That's actually something that I'm very passionate about. These microstructures of conversation, sequences and turns, and how they work, and that, for example, at the start, LLMs were much too verbose, right? They were chatty. They talked all the time. I did tests with ChatGPT audio mode with some friends. I even captured this on camera, and was painful to see them waiting for the AI to stop talking. At that point, it wasn't even interruptible, so that they could tell the AI that they wanted to talk about something else that was close, but not the thing the AI was talking about. So, yeah, we humans have this quick exchanges. We have, nobody talks, at least if it's not me, nobody talks for minutes, and if we talk for minutes, it's something like this institutional format we have here, which is an interview, which has very certain rules. Or we have something like, I got to tell you a story. I've heard this great thing. Please allow me to now talk for 2 minutes telling my story, right? Otherwise, it's always a quick back and forth. And even then you have back channeling and other interactional signals. So I think understanding conversation analysis, understanding the microstructures of conversations is still important, even if you could say most of the time the large language model will hopefully handle the conversation stuff. I think it's wrong because when it doesn't handle it, you have to have a clear idea of what is going wrong there. And
well, I'd love to maybe dive in a little bit there, because I know you told me recently that you've been diving a bit deeper into kind of language analysis. And I think there's a whole academic field out there on conversation analysis. Yeah, sure. Now, what fascinates me, though, and I love when people speak at conferences about this topic, how can we bring it into the practical day-to-day, where conversations are often people know they're talking with a bot, and they speak differently when they're talking with the bot. And so I think there's another element of like, how do we take the learnings there and make it practical? And I'd love to hear if you've had any recent learnings or things that you've been able to build into your kind of design and architecture journey.
Yeah. So what you are talking about is recipient design, right? We are always adopting to what we think our interactant expects from us. So we are talking differently to babies than to our older children or to our boss, or it's always, you have these social implications, but also those epistemic implications. What do we think the other person knows and what do they understand? And now think about bots. What do they know? What do they understand? People have very different expectations today with, people that have been exposed to ChatGPT or other large language model based chats a lot have very high expectations, might talk very naturally, even tell a complicated story. And other people who are still in the Alexa world or never have talked to something like that will talk to them like, I don't know, they are something like a mixture of a baby and a foreigner. So people that don't understand our language and are have a very small idea of how the world works. So, and I think we have to somewhat cater to all of them. At the moment, it's really difficult because we might exceed expectations or we might be still below expectations because our technology we are using at the moment is maybe not the same as ChatGPT audio mode. What you need to be able to do is careful deliberation. No, not deliberation. Is the wrong word. Is disambiguation. Is having good questions that come after the first utterance of the caller, right? To really find out what they are really talking about. What are the details that matter to us to understand what the process is.
I always knew this as triage, but I don't know what the official word is, because disambiguation for me sounds like someone said something that was truly like you can't really tell what it is, but I'm not sure what the right is. Disambiguation the most common word that people use for this scenario?
My mind is at the moment it's blank regarding conversation analysis. They will talk about it differently.
True. There's that like right? More academic field where I feel like that every time I listen, I'm like, so that's what you call that.
But on the other hand, I've heard in the industry, it was another podcast where somebody I think from Swiss Telekom was talking about intent classification, and she was talking a lot about disambiguation because if somebody just says contract, the problem is it can it's about a contract, but it can mean so many different things. So you can talk about clarifying questions, disambiguation question. I don't really know. I think the problem is we don't have a real word for that. And as you said, if you're not used to using those words, you can have misunderstandings.
Wow, there's a word for everything. I feel like we need to find a way to like bring the worlds together so we're all talking about the same things, because it's so difficult, I think, to move from one project to another these days because you are introduced to a whole new set of vocabulary every single time.
Right. It's also nonverbal cues is another word for it. So,
there you go.
So and I think even the linguists, if you look at the, I really like this conversation analysis, which is rooted in sociology, really, an idea of some Californians a long time in the 70s. They started out. Harvey Sachs and co. And then there are there are other linguists that are that have their own theories. So it's really even under the when scientists are talking to each other, they have a lot of work to do to find a proper common ground because they have so many different ways of talking about the same phenomenon. So
This is something I notice also so deeply when I talk with someone that's been in what was and still is to some extent called the conversational AI space, and someone who entered into the agentic AI space, someone who's been working 6 years ago versus someone who just started working on conversational interfaces. I find that's also another fascinating layer of difference because for me, my whole life, I've been, don't anthropomorphize the machines. Don't talk about them like
yeah,
brains
right,
or humans.
right.
And now on the flip side, everything is memory, brains, humans. It's
Mhm. Yeah.
coworker, co-pilot, etc.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to not judge it, but embrace it in some way or another. But I still feel like that's the other layer. You have like academics. You have people that have been working, 6 years ago, and then the folks that just entered the field as well, which is a whole layer cake of different terminology and ways
Yeah,
of
yeah.
talking about things.
Right, right.
All right. Well, I'd also love to leave some space here to talk, about any topics that you think you've gotten interesting insight about, or something that you see in the future that you think more people should know about. Think of it as a section for hot takes if you have any.
Yeah. The latest in agents, in agentic AI and multi-agents even. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know what to make of it yet in terms of conversation, right? So I think you at Rasa are also looking into this and are a bit skeptical also about, what does it mean? I think in our first conversation we talked about this multi-agent thing, right? So
Yeah.
I think we really need to compartmentalize what agents are doing to reduce complexity. The monolithic one agent does it all thing won't work. And so I've been working at E.ON most of this year, and we tried to do a pilot for a service for an energy provider or energy network provider. And what we found is that we wanted to have these, you called it triage, right? A concierge bot that
Mm-hmm.
that triages what the customer wants, and then will, for example, we had a meter reading bot, will then forward to a meter reading bot. And of course, you could try to do this in the background. It's just one bot, but there are many bots in the background. But then I think there's this real problem of what Alan Nichols talked about is you have this problem of context of I can suddenly ask a question that is not for the meter reading bot, and now in the background everything has to find out what the real agent is, what the proper agent is to answer that question. And so at the moment it seems we have this sort of social construct which is known to customers to forward to different bot personalities. So we had
Yep.
E.ON, the
I know this.
concierge bot, and we had John, the
Yeah.
meter reading expert,
Yeah.
and then we will forward between John and E.ON. And it's a bit annoying, I think, for customers.
Yeah.
They know this, but then I think it's easier to understand that John, the meter reading expert, cannot talk about a new contract or cannot talk about solar panels or whatever, or photovoltaic devices, and will have to forward to another expert.
Yeah.
That's one way of a construct to get around this. It's not really elegant, but I think it's a constraint of the current technology that we have to do it.
Well, I'd love to. I think one of our things at Rasa, kind of our vision, is like this one continuous conversation, not something that's interrupted by different agents. And I think it was funny because I saw a demo of a company that tried to show multi-agent capability, which at the end of the day is really great. Like we want to be able to have these different agents that communicate together in general. It sounds like a good idea, but ultimately they ended up highlighting one of my biggest pain points in customer contact centers is when you get passed around from different people that didn't know what the last one is talking about. So of course there's kind of a context layer that has to be involved so that everyone has shared context about what's going on. And so I think when I think about then the technology problem, I've kind of seen it separated in two ways. You have A to A. So that's when you kind of have your conversational interface and it needs to connect to a completely external agent. That's really hard because that external agent's a black box. So if they update, change things, don't share context in the right way or in the same format that you need to have it, things go poorly. But I think there's lots of ways to have, kind of multi-agent experiences within one universe, within the company itself. So there's always a risk, but of course also promising if you want to expose an agent for others to use, there's some potential there. But I think that's kind of the root of what Alan's talking about. It's really hard to route between these things. It's, if there's a change in one, the problems cascade. That's challenging as well. And you also need this kind of shared state or context layer that makes it possible for them all to interact effectively together.
Yeah. Otherwise, you get the situation we don't want, that you start telling the next person or the next bot all the story again that you had to, and that is really annoying, right? And and I also see this problem of latency for, voice is my passion. So, and that
Absolutely.
is not waiting for you. So
Yeah.
I think you have to have proper cues then, you can play it in a way that you say, oh, okay, I have to look that up. Please give me a moment. Or, oh, let me just think about that a moment, just to make people understand. Now it takes 8 seconds because I have to talk to this other bot, and he will go out and fetch some information and come back to me, and then I can give you an answer.
That's also, this is my hot take, I would say, is when you're building for text, really think about if that same approach would work for voice, if at any point in the time you'd like to migrate to voice. In my experience on projects, it's much easier when the text and the voice teams are not completely separate, because there's a lot of ways that you can accelerate your voice journey if you can build on the text journey. And if you have to build it completely separate, at least in my opinion, I think it's like starting from scratch when you could have had a mega boost. So if you can find ways to incorporate it, and I know not everyone likes to build them together, that's fine. But I think is.
I have to admit I'm strongly opposed. That's even a trick question I asked when we did platform selection. I asked every vendor what they think about doing. If you have chat, then it's easy to do voice also, right? So you just.
I would agree. Not the same.
You didn't say that, right? But if they said that, I knew, okay, they don't know what they are talking about, because voice is some things you can't do in voice, some things you have to do in a different way. It's ephemeral. It can be annoying if you're verbose. So
in my opinion, I'm thinking more about like the process design. Obviously it has to be wildly different for voice, but if the two teams exist separately and are just not, and the brand voice isn't the same, the user processes are not the same, for me, I think it can feel quite disjointed. So we always had, at least within my projects, we'd have, usually people start with text. I think that's changing a little bit, that we're seeing voice first projects. And then the voice team would like spin off. So they're semi-autonomous, but if they then have to have a whole separate technology, it's harder for them to work together.
I think that's kind of a déjà vu for me, because, I'm old, so I've seen a lot of technical revolutions, and one was the mobile revolution. And I don't know whether you experienced it. We now have a mobile website, and we have a team for the mobile website, and it's technologically completely separated, and they don't even have all the connections to all the backends of the website. So, and that's a nightmare, right? So I absolutely agree. Those teams should work together. But they just should acknowledge that some parts of the way they design the dialogue just have to keep in mind, this is chat, I can do different stuff here, and this is voice. And
Well, I think it's the same. Even within chat channels, you have different design affordances. WhatsApp, app. I mean, these also, I'm curious if you experienced as well. For me, that was, you'd have kind of, I feel like the central kind of center of excellence in teams kind of gets built around chat, or at least used to, because that's where folks start. And then you see kind of these like channel expertise building out in different sub teams kind of around it. Is that something you experienced similarly, and would you change it? Would you do it differently?
Not really that there was a separate team, but at least that we found that WhatsApp chats are just different from normal chats, right? If you open a web chat, or you have a distinct chat in your application, in your mobile application, it's maybe a little bit more like WhatsApp. But the problem is, for a web chat, for example, it's synchronous, right? You are sitting there and waiting for the response. It might be okay that it takes a little longer than voice. You don't have to do it in 300 milliseconds, but it might be good to do it in 3 to 5 seconds most. Maybe that's already quite long. But in WhatsApp, there are people that will ask a question at, for example, at 8 o'clock in the evening, and then we find it's a question for a human, and we answer in the morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's perfectly okay, right? They don't really. Of course, they would like to answer us directly, but it's okay to answer later. You are notified when the answer comes in, so it's really different from a
That's
real-time
fascinating.
chat where you always waiting for the answer. And
That is super interesting. I've helped teams write copy for WhatsApp, but I've never been in charge of like reviewing the user experience on it. So that's super interesting. I didn't know that. And I think this all comes back to the kind of original question you posed at the beginning is, what is a multi-agent architecture going to look like at the end of the day? Because organizationally, I think the problem we've seen teams have is they might be building the central customer service agent, but around them popping up like literal daisies are a hundred other little projects and they have no control. So I think that's where the thought process is, okay, how do we, make these all magically work together? And as my example said, you probably can't invite them all to the Slack channel and hope it's going to work out. But on the flip
right,
side,
right. You
there's
need
there's
alignment.
protocols that can help, but organizationally, I think that's probably even the bigger issue that technology vendors like Rasa can't necessarily solve for you. You can help you work around it with technology, but that's definitely a hot organizational problem, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, have a flexible tool, but in the end, there is, that's when I started in my career, I thought every problem has a technical solution. I was, I was young, I was naive, I was idealistic in some ways, and then later, when I was on my way to a project manager, I found most of the problems that are really interesting are organizational or social problems, right? And the technical problems, most of the time, you just have to throw the right experts and money at it, and it will be solved mostly. You can have nasty legacy situations where you really are in a tight spot. But the really interesting ones, the ones that really bite you, are the ones where people are involved and you have an organization with different local what does a sociologist calls it, local rationalization. So everybody has their own perspective, right? And different teams will have slightly different goals, and and if you don't have a good alignment, they might start to work against each other, and then you have these problems.
I love it. Totally agree. I would say maybe to wrap up, especially as you mentioned earlier, you've lived through lots of revolutionary times in technology. And I feel like we should be looking to these people more because they've experienced what worked and what didn't. Thinking about your time in the mobile web revolution, what do you think is the one lesson that this generation of builders really needs to learn?
I think one thing I think is we had those revolutions, right? This is not the first time, so please don't constantly talk about this changes everything. And often it's you have this in the short term we overestimate the effect, and in the long term we underestimate it. It's if you look at what mobile made possible, that is absolutely normal for us today, like using a computer on the street to magically get a car that brings me to some point. This was absolutely unthinkable in the when we still had only those old smartphones or those cell phones, and so things will. So I think we have to be careful about the future. We have to iterate into the future. We have to be open to find out how people really react, what they really find useful. And I think we constantly have to adopt to our new insights of what is valuable, what is really beneficial. Always look at the behavior of the users. Don't judge from your own experience. And then, the future is is something we have to explore, and not something that that we can extrapolate from the latest hot stuff we are finding in the press. And
Wise words to live by. Thank you so much, Joachim. I really appreciate it. I've learned so much from this discussion, and I wish you the very best at DHL as you move forward into your next role.
Thank you, Lauren. Was a real pleasure talking to you, and thanks for having me. And yeah, have a great time. Have more good ideas at Rasa. I will continue following you, and I'm really keen to see what you come up with. So,
Will do. Bye for now.
bye.